a big part of my recovery has been, finding this higher power, finding this spirituality, finding this thing that works for me. And for me personally, it's a combination of kind of like a lot of the things from the Christian faith I grew up in, with some of the things that I saw with, Buddhism or some of the Eastern religions,
Right.
with just some good old fashioned wholesome, like, morality, like
Values.
good, like, let's not be a dick, and or like not even just let not be a dick. Let's just be a nice person. Like, I have a tattoo on my arm, and it's kindness should be the natural way of life, not the exception. So that's how I try to live my life. Like,
That's cool.
I know what it's like for people to be in that spot. I know what it's like to be angry. I know what it's like to not want to go to group. I know what it's like to hate yourself. I know what it's like to all those things.
Yeah.
And so I can take a step back from my own pride and say, maybe that person is just really struggling. What can I do to help them?
Welcome to Just Today, where our platform is a reminder that recovery isn't a solitary journey. It's a community of connections where our guests share their stories and the power of recovery. Just for today. Now to your host, Mike Schutte.
So welcome back to Just Today. Good to be back in the studio with me. I got a guy that I actually met recently. Don't really know that much about your story, but looking forward to sitting down, and I appreciate you sharing your vulnerability and your honesty with us. So welcome to the show, Garrett. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you for having me. I appreciate this.
So we're going to get right into this, and we're just going to kind of talk a little bit about, it always helps to tell us a little bit about where you're from, your family, a little bit of your dynamics, and then we'll go right from there.
Yeah. So I grew up, my parents were pastors who ran drug and alcohol rehab centers for the Salvation Army. So for 30 plus years, my parents were doing this thing, and they were helping people in, like, grew up in alcohol, drugs, any of that stuff. No part of my life whatsoever. Like, there wasn't around the house. We didn't talk about it just because of how ingrained it was with, like, what my parents did, that, like, I didn't personally do anything. I didn't, other than, like, one time when I was, like, 9 and we, like, stole some, like, beer from, like, my friend's grandfather, which tasted disgusting at the time because I was 9. I didn't drink again until I was 21. And even then, like, it was pretty, solidly, like, just, it was what it was. It wasn't anything big. But yeah, like, there was just, like, this, like, I knew my mom was in recovery, but she didn't really talk about it because the whole faith thing was a lot bigger part than the recovery portion of it. But I also know my dad was the complete opposite. My dad, if I remember correctly, like, either didn't or has very rarely ever, like, smoked or drank at all. Like, I think it's none of the above, but, like, he may have whatever, but, like, it was just never a thing for him. So, and just, like, even, like, my friends groups growing up, like, alcohol and all that was just never a thing. It wasn't until I, like, started dating a girl in my early 20s, and I saw, like, the way her family interacted with alcohol, and I was like, oh, that's the way normal people drink alcohol. Like, because for me, it was just like, we don't even touch the stuff. It was never in our house or any of that kind of stuff.
So no, like, when you grow, which is crazy, like, it's an unusual, like, background to growing up to something like that. You really didn't start, and it wasn't really an issue for you, even when you started at 21 or whatever, right? It was later in your life that things started to move into a different direction for you.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, it was, I remember for the long, I think it dawned on me sometime between 18 and 20 that, like, normal people drank and it wasn't a sin. Because that's, like, how it, like, even though that was never actually said out of my parents' mouth, like, that's how it came across. And I think because of what they did, and because I saw how broken some of the people that came into, like, the rehabs that they ran were, and, like, all that stuff, to me, like, it resonated as, like, drinking was a sin. And that's, that plays a big role into, like, some of, like, my religious trauma and stuff like that. Like, growing up, being a pastor's kid, like, a lot of the stuff I felt, I'm realizing now, in my early 40s, that, like, I put a lot of pressure on myself to be perfect, to be this, to be that, and even people probably did a little bit too, but I think more on myself than I realized, and then ended up like taking all that I put on myself and like saying, oh, other people did this to me. So it's, part of this whole journey for me is the self-discovery and learning like what things, what things were like human based and what things were like just my own inner self and insecurities and stuff like that. And, going through some of the recovery things that I've done through, the different programs that I've been in have led me to some of that self-discovery. But like, yeah, it like, once again, it wasn't even just like, it was a normal thing that other people did. It was like, like that's like bad. Like God doesn't like that. Like, and that's how my mind or my younger mind interpreted it. So it was weird when I got out, and kind of underneath from my parents and saw that just like, people will just go out and like have a beer at night, or people will just drink a couple of times during the week. And it's just kind of like a thing. And it was odd, to say the least, for a while.
Right. Did you, when did things start, like, when did you start getting some consequences of some of the things that, that progressively kind of moves through each of our kind of channels, right? So
Yeah. So I want to say sometime between my late 20s and my early 30s, this thing started happening where, life started to progress. I went back to school in my late 20s to get a degree, and like I was married at this point. I had one kid, and life just started getting big, and I didn't know how to deal with it. I knew I wanted to be a father. I loved working with kids. I'd worked a lot with kids, and I liked that part of it. But I also just like wasn't equipped. I felt I wasn't equipped to be like a good husband. I was really, a lot of the typical stuff you hear, like I just beat myself up over everything. I couldn't, any good thing I did was always filtered through like, but I could have done better, but that person did that better than me. I couldn't just be proud of myself for the stuff that I did. So I was always comparing myself, and I was always all that stuff. So there's always a low enough expectation. So like, the way I described, like the way I set my expectations was I always had low expectations, because if I succeeded them, then good. Like, I actually did something. And if I didn't, I was like, all right, well, that's where I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to be down here. And I like unintentionally lived my life like that for a long time. And once at some point, like, it started off with like, man, I just need a strong drink a night. And maybe that was 3 or 4 nights a week. And then it just turned into like, that was something that I did most nights, was just have like a really strong drink every night. I didn't necessarily drink a whole lot during the day. It wasn't a thing. And then once I got into like my early 30s and we had a second kid, and like I was working as a personal trainer, and I wasn't making a lot of money, but I was working a lot of hours, and I was doing, my ex-wife had to take care of the kids a lot, and like I said, wasn't making a lot of money in the one thing that I thought I was pretty decent at. And then I was also coaching. And so I had all this stuff going on, and life was really busy. And I felt like I wasn't living up to expectations. Yeah. And then it kind of like the way I started to deal with that and cope with that was just to drink more.
Right. Yeah. No. And I know. I certainly understand that, and I'm empathetic towards that. Like you mentioned, that whole thing with comparison. And I've mentioned this in my story many times, that I really suffered with that. And a lot of the individuals that I talk to and interview through that still have that feeling. And it's no matter what that is, it's like anxiety, comparing our lives. There's something in there that it's just fear-based, right? Mm-hmm. Like there's something that you're like, you can't keep up, right? With sometimes it's like this invisible thing that you're like can't keep up with, and you don't know why. Yeah. But obviously, when you find a solution, in which the solution is booze or drugs for some of us, right? Yep. And then that finally slows your mind down, right? And it slowed everything down for me. And then, you think you can live that way for a while, and then progressively, obviously, things turn to shit, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, it is true. Like, jails, institutions, and then finally death, right?
Yep.
And I got very close to some of those things, but I appreciate you sharing that. That's good stuff. So just walk us through some of the stuff. Like, so you got your second child, and then you're married.
So and then a couple years into that, like depression really started to hit, and we were right around that COVID-y area. And I started drinking a little bit more, and like my ex-wife was, at first she was drinking with me, and then like I would stay up and keep on drinking, and then the last 2 or 3 years of my marriage were just like me blackout drinking most nights. Her, and a lot of the stuff. It's one of the biggest. I don't know. It's a weird conundrum that I have because like I don't remember a lot of the stuff that I did because I was blackout drunk, and my ex-wife had to take on a lot of that. She took on probably 90 to 95% of my alcoholism. A lot of other people didn't see it. And so in that way, it saved me, because if I knew how badly I hurt her on a regular basis, I probably would have driven deeper into depression. So like it saved me that, and I kind of like blacked out. But like just knowing that I hurt somebody that I loved that much is like it was crippling at times. It didn't stop me from drinking. It started like I would have like the intentions of like every single day being like, all right, cool, like I'm not gonna drink today. Man, I really didn't want to hurt her again. I really didn't want my kids to see me act like that or do that. Like there was a moment at one point where we had a door that went to the basement that had all the heights of the kids, and I punched a hole through it when I was drunk. And my then 3 or 4 year old youngest son, Evan, woke up and was like, "What is that?"
Yeah.
And my ex-wife covered for me, and she's like, Daddy slept in, or something like that. I don't even remember the lie that she said, but she didn't have to protect me, but right. She did. Right. And she did that for 2 or 3 years. And, there was this progression that I talked about when I spoke that I was usually the earlier riser of the two of us, and I would get up from when we started living together, and I would usually, give her a kiss goodbye, I love you, and go. And at some point it turned into, don't you remember what you said to me last night? And then maybe like a hesitant kiss. And then it turned into like she would literally roll over away from me. And so by the end of it, like we were just living there and trying to survive. And I was trying to not, hurt enough on the inside to try to hurt myself. And she was just trying to keep herself safe and preserve like the marriage without the kids seeing the destructive force that their dad could be sometimes when he drank. And my biggest circumstances, I got pretty lucky, were a couple of injuries to myself, drunken falls. It was there was a couple of times I did most of my drinking after my kids went to bed, but there was a couple of times. There was one time in particular that I started drinking in the middle of the day, and I woke up, and then all of a sudden my younger brother, who lived about 40 minutes away from me, was standing over my bed, and I don't remember anything that happened for like the 3 hours. And I go, "Hey man, like what are you doing here?" And he's like, "You really don't remember?" And I go, "No." He's like, "You scared your wife and kids. Like they called me over." So like my brother came in to be a buffer, and that towards the end that happened a couple of times where he had to come over and kind of be a buffer. And once again, nothing bad ever happened. I never, unless you count the multiple holes in walls and stuff like that. And then at some point, I got to a point. So this is early 2021.
I gotta stop it for a second? Yeah. So I've been where you're at, like, in that cycle of insanity, right?
Yep.
Like you kind of want to stop, right? And then you're like, okay, today I'm not going to drink. And then you're drinking by like 3 or 4 o'clock, right? And but that's got to be so devastating, like when you're destroying the relationship. And then the issue with some of that is like, even when you're going through that and your wife's turning over, it's like, you feel so bad. So you need to go drink more. Mm-hmm. Right? It's like, it's like you can't stop, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And to that point, like to me, like I I'm such somebody, like, I didn't really care about myself at that point. Like, I pretty much considered myself a piece of garbage for what I was doing to my family. But I loved everybody else around me. I could show love to everybody else except for myself. And that was part of my, my disease and what afflicted me. So I woke up one day and there'd been some stuff going on with my marriage, and I felt horrible about it, and I couldn't stop. And then I kept on drinking, and then like all this other stuff kind of happened, and I got to a point where like I could feel like everything was coming loose. And I just woke up one morning and I go, oh, okay, I don't want to be here anymore. And so I got up, I went to work, I trained a couple of people. I remember walking out of the gym that I worked at, walking by one of my coworkers, and just being like, all right, cool, he's going to be the last person that sees me alive. And I went home and I took a bunch of sleeping pills, and I drank a lot of bourbon. And, as this honestly has happened a couple of times in my life, like something, I consider my higher power now, like reach out to me. And I had enough shame to reach out to somebody that I had done wrong to and just said, I'm so sorry. And it seemed really out of character or whatever. That person had worked at the gym I worked at and had actually seen me leave and actually reached out to my ex-wife, now ex-wife, my wife at the time, and said, I don't think Garrett's okay. And so my ex-wife called me and she was like, what's going on? And I'm just not a good liar. I'm not a good liar when I'm sober, and I'm an even worse liar when I drink. And I had been drinking obviously at that point, and I just said, I'm trying to kill myself. I'm laying in the bed with both my dogs. And so they sent an ambulance out, and I had to go to the hospital, stomach pumped and all that stuff. And like, for a few weeks there, things were okay. Like, but I never, at this point, people that do some of the 12-step programs, or the different whatever, I was doing what was just called white knuckling it, which is like, I didn't have anything outside of myself helping me. I was just trying my best by sheer willpower to stop drinking, which most people that do this thing know that, like, there's only so long you can hold out, and that was inevitably the case. And and I went a little bit longer, and then a couple of months later, I'd gone back and forth between like, I'm only going to drink when I don't work, I'm only going to drink this, I'm only going to do that, and like I had I'm only drinking when my kids go to bed. And I had one unfortunate incident. I want to say it was in mid-May, where I had my oldest son was 8, and I said something to him when I was drunk that I just felt awful about, and I can't believe that I just said that to my son. And so like I was white knuckling it for about 3 weeks at that point, and then I won't get into the whole situation, but like my mom passed away. Okay, we were going to visit her because she was sick, and literally. We were flying out first thing in the morning, and she died overnight. So we didn't even get to see her. And so we had this whole situation where like we're flying down there. My kids don't really know what's going on. We were supposed to go down the week after and like do all like the fun. My parents were living in Florida, fun Florida stuff. And I came back and I just didn't want to do it. And so my ex took the kids still down there, and I drank. I drank a lot. I had a phone call from my mom that she'd called me the night before, and that just, my mind, my depression, my whatever, my alcoholism just grasped onto that thing, and I just tried to drink that memory, that phone call away, and it just obviously didn't work. And going to work hungover for that week, and people were like, "Oh no, it's okay. Like, we understand." And that's all I needed to justify drinking. If someone said like, "That's okay, we get it," like. And then shortly after that, 2 days after my mom's funeral, there was a mini intervention in my family, convinced me to go to rehab. They framed it as a retreat because I knew that if I said rehab, I wouldn't have gone. And I just remember saying like, are you going to make me do AA? Or are they going to talk about God? Which are the two things I couldn't deal with at that point. And my brother was like, oh, no, absolutely not. Which are both things that I've dabbled in, heavily in my recovery, which is funny to me now. But, And I spent 3 months down in Florida.
Okay.
And I admitted I was an alcoholic for the first time.
What year was that?
The 2021.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was June. It was late June. I want to say it was the 27th that I considered like my first sobriety date. And then I was there for almost 3 months. And I learned a lot of stuff. I had a really good therapist. I had some really good people. I weirdly had, I was living in the Kennett Square, Delaware area, and I weirdly had like 4 or 5 people from that same area show up in that same rehab in Boca in Florida. Really? Which is like, I can look back and say like that was definitely kind of like a, higher power God moment for me, because there were people that like understood the area I was from and all that kind of stuff. And then I came out of there being like, cool, like I'll probably try to stay sober for like 6 months. That was my goal. I was
give it a shot.
Yeah, no, that's what it was. It was like I know this thing like where like I still didn't get it all. Yeah. I whatever we say, I my bottom wasn't low enough. I didn't have enough pain. There was not enough there for me, and so I had to kind of I still thought I was there, and I came back and I'd lost all my clients as a personal trainer because I was gone for 3 months. I didn't have any time. I had no desire to do some of the programs that help keep you sober. So I just was sitting in a house by myself, dealing with like this fact that I'm an alcoholic, and like everyone wanted to know where I was the last 3 months, and me not being overly comfortable sharing it yet, and whatever, and just like being embarrassed and ashamed and all that stuff. And so 4 days after I got back from 90 days in rehab, I drank. And then 2 days later, I drank again. And my ex-wife gave me an ultimatum, said, if you drink again, that's the end of the marriage. And so she came home a week later. I was drunk. My kids were away. And I, once again, tried to kill myself. This is the hazy part of the story, is where like I remember doing the whole, I could probably get away with getting a little drunk before she gets home. And I remember those thoughts, and I remember starting to drink. And then I'd wake up in the hospital a couple of days later. That's all I remember. Everything that I'm about to say was all been filled in by other people. She came home. I was drunk. She said it's over. I took like 4 bottles worth of like my medication. And then, tried to lay in the backyard and just said, just let me die, which she obviously wasn't going to do. Right. So I woke up. In the hospitals. They were taking the ventilator out. I had catheter in. The only thing I remember during that whole haze was at one point I woke up and my older brother was grabbing my shoulder, and I think about that moment all the time, because he's the one that got me to rehab. He's the one that helped me so much early on, and like I couldn't at that point, and I still it took a couple of years to get realize how much I was hurting my family. But I remember that, and then they had to cut off all my clothes because I tried to Hulk out in the ER, and they had to hold me down and pin me down and sedate me and all that stuff. And then I got sent to a psych ward, and this is kind of I call this my bottom. Yeah. Is I'm sitting in the psych ward. I don't have any clothes because they had to cut them off. So I'm wearing a hospital robe front and back, and we're sitting in a circle, and we have to sit crisscross applesauce, Indian style, whatever you want to call it. And I couldn't because I was wearing 2 robes front and back, and I didn't want everyone to see my genitalia, as you would say. So I had to kind of do this weird side saddle thing, and I just remember being I hate this feeling right now. I'm in a psych ward. Yeah. I don't have underwear, and I can't even sit comfortably. I have to sit weird, and it made me feel uncomfortable and made me feel like a mermaid, which I did not like. And and I just remember just being I don't ever want to feel that. And so that's one of those moments that I go back to whenever I feel whenever I maybe consider a drink. I'm like, do you want to be that mermaid in the psych ward again? And the answer is absolutely not.
Was that your moment where you're just like, this is, I've had it? Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe not like, and I don't even think, I think what it made me do was made me consider anything. I will at least try anything. I can't promise that I'll stick with anything, but I'm willing to at least try anything. And that included things like AA, living in a sobriety house, all that stuff. I had my first 2 calls in the psych ward, which I'm not sure if you've ever been in a psych ward. They have like these like little payphone things, and the cord is about this long. So like you have to sit this close to the wall.
Know it.
Yeah. So I'm sitting there, and that's where I found out I was getting divorced. And that's where I found out that nobody wanted me to live with them anymore. So, and that I was going back to rehab less than 2 weeks after leaving for 90 days. So within the span of, this 6 months or whatever, I spent 4 months in rehab, 2 weeks at home, 9 days in a psych ward, and my mom died. So there was like my life was an absolute shambles.
Yeah. But it's important to realize, look, and I remember that because I went to a psych ward, and even when I got out of the psych ward, I still had my issues that I had to deal with. But I was like, it was like 9 days in there. But I think it's important to realize that, even in those darker days, like, you're talking on your ex-wife on the phone, you find out all this stuff, that, it's easy to be like, everything's over, right? Yeah. And in fact, sometimes it's everything's beginning. Yep. And that's really, really important. Like, you get to that point where you're like, holy and you then, it's amazing, like your journey today, right? Like you can think back to that, right? And that was like 3 years ago, 3.5 years, 4 years ago, 4.5 years ago. So you're like, that's there is that step, like, that you can get out of it. Yeah. Where you sometimes you're just like, like, how am I going to make it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. This is like the kind of like progression of kind of similar to what you said was like, so like my first meeting in the first rehab I went to, they read the Daily Reflection, which is like an AA book that they read that has like a saying or like a little meditation or whatever. And as soon as they said AA, I literally walked out the room because I didn't want anything to do with it. Having to do with my mom and all that stuff. Like I just really couldn't deal with it. And like, and to know that like I'm a rule follower to a T. So like I don't leave groups. I go to everything. I'm a good student. I do the thing because I want to be seen in a really good light. So like even me walking out was like high defiance by me. And come to my second rehab, 4 months later, 3.5 months later, and I'm sitting with the guy named Big Book Bob, who is one of the AA guys at my second rehab, and I'm like, all right, convince me. Yeah. Convince me. Like I don't want to do this stuff. It looks stupid. It reminds me too much of church. It reminds me a little bit of a cult. The Big Book sounds a lot like the Bible. I don't want to deal with any of that. Tell me I'm wrong. Yeah. And he did. He convinced me enough to at least say like, hey man, like it's different. Give it a try. He's like, what are your other options? What just happened to you? Like where can you go from here? Yeah. Down is a bad option. At least give it a try. And I was like, okay. And so like that was it. Like that was enough. That was enough willingness from my part to be like, I'm at least gonna try to figure out what being an alcoholic is, what people do to stay sober, like how does life move on from here? Because I didn't have my kids, didn't have the house I was living with my ex-wife. I lost my car, dogs. It's like a really bad country song. You know what I mean? Like I lost everything. And I'm just sitting here like in this rehab and I'm like, I guess I'm going to a recovery house. I don't know what that is. Like a bunch of other dudes that are addicts and alcoholics. And I guess we'll figure it out from there. And that's my entire 4.5 years of recovery has been like, I guess I'll just figure it out from here. So like, got jobs.
One crumb at a time, man.
Yeah.
It's just like, I totally understand that. I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how many years have you been sober now? What do you got?
About 4.5.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what do you tell me a little bit about what you do? What are you doing today? What are you doing today?
So I actually work in treatment. I work for a treatment center, and
Miramont?
Yeah, Miramont, and I'm a clinical lead there. So we kind of like are the face in front of the patients. We help wake them up, help get them to group, help to just do all like the little things that like get them moving from thing to thing. We have the most FaceTime with them, so like I get to interact with other people that are kind of in that same spot that I was, and a big part of my recovery has been, finding this higher power, finding this spirituality, finding this thing that works for me. And for me personally, it's a combination of kind of like a lot of the things from the Christian faith I grew up in, with some of the things that I saw with, Buddhism or some of the Eastern religions,
Right.
with just some good old fashioned wholesome, like morality, like
Values.
good, like, let's not be a dick, and or like not even just not be a dick. Let's just be a nice person. Like I have a tattoo on my arm, and it's kindness should be the natural way of life, not the exception. So that's how I try to live my life. Like
That's cool.
I know what it's like for people to be in that spot. I know what it's like to be angry. I know what it's like to not want to go to group. I know what it's like to hate yourself. I know what it's like to all those things.
Yeah.
And so I can take a step back from my own pride and say, maybe that person is just really struggling. What can I do to help them? What kind of kindness can I show them?
Yeah.
And that's everybody from the patients in the thing to the driver next to me that cuts me off, to all those things. I really try to, in my daily life, find a perspective outside of my own sometimes when I get frustrated. If I'm frustrated with somebody, it usually means that I'm putting expectations on them, or I expect them to act the way that I act, which is an unfair thing to put on anybody. So one of the things I actively try to do is like, I don't know what that person's coming from. I don't know what their day is like. I don't know what that's like. And, it's never something I would have been able to do before I got sober.
Right.
Going through some of the things I've gone through to get here, some of the the 12-step things that I've done in the programs that I've done, and some of the other work I've done, whether it's through therapy or through just interacting with other addicts and alcoholics and having a common bond, and just hearing that I'm not the only one that struggles with these intrusive thoughts, that struggles with all these things. Like there's all these.
It's that community of moving away from self, right?
For sure.
I always talk about that. It's like, your story is very similar to mine on in that regards. It's, like I always had like the highs been out, and I was always like, nah, that's not for me. And then finally, when I let things get in, I was like, okay. And it's not all about me. It's about, all these other communities out there, and all these other people out there, and not being so self-absorbed. And it's like, that's what I love about recovery,
Yeah.
So and I think that, the coolest thing for me is like, recovery has given me the ability to see. And for the longest time, I could only see myself, and that's the cool thing about, your journey, my journey, the people that have to go through some of that stuff. Tell me a little bit about how's your relationship with your kids these days, and how's your relationship, with your ex-wife, and you guys, work things out. I understand that, because it's like when we get, it takes a while when we get into sobriety and recovery, and it's like, we become these people that we're kind of meant to be, right? Or hope to be and wanted to be, and it's. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So as you probably, it was really hard when I first came out. When I first came out, I was not allowed to see my kids without somebody else there. And I just remember, that's probably the angriest I've been in a very, very long time, because I'm like, I never hurt them. Like in my mind, I was like, I never hurt them. I didn't touch them. Maybe they saw me angry and yell a little bit, but like, why would you take this away from me? And like, once again, I wasn't able to see the pain and the hurt and all the agony that I had put her through.
Yeah.
And even I can't say, because it's her, like, and even if it was a punishment to me, like, I probably deserved it for my behavior the last few years. So like I was living in a sobriety house. I was living about 25 minutes from them. And after a couple of months of showing that I could not drink, which that was it. Like, I think the biggest part of it, and this is what I had to learn, was like, I wasn't being punished, but it was like, even though that's how I looked at it, I wasn't being punished. It was like, she was just trying to protect my kids.
Yeah.
Like, because like,
and it's their recovery too.
Yeah.
And we have a tendency to forget that. Like we're like a lot of people that come out of recovery or come out of rehab, they're like, okay, everything's cool. Yeah. Like, nah, it don't work that way. It takes, it took us a long time to get into those woods. It takes a long time to get out of those woods. And it takes the people that we love, their time for us to come back into their lives. And I know that feeling. Yeah. I could relate exactly what you just said. Like, because when you come out, you're like, all right, I want to see my kids. All right, I'm good. Yeah. And that doesn't work that way. Right?
Yeah, I remember having a realization, and this was probably right around maybe a little over a year, which was right around, I think, a year, 3 months, 2 months. Right, it was right around when I like made an amends to my ex-wife, which I went and like took responsibility for the stuff that I did. I remember having the realization that like I spent 3 months in rehab right after my mom died. Everybody knew my mom died. Nobody knew where Garrett went. And the person that they could ask was her. So she's stuck over the course of the summer with everyone asking, hey, where's Garrett? Like, I know his mom died. Like, we haven't seen him in months, like people at my job. And she's got 2 young kids. They were 8 and 6 at the time. Yeah, they were like 8 and 6 at the time. So it's like she's then having to parent, deal with all this other stuff, while also dealing with all the trauma that I caused her the last couple of years. Yeah. And I'm just sitting, listen, it's rehab. It's not fun, but I'm sitting there working on myself, trying to get better. And I'm telling her, hey, I'm learning this stuff. I'm doing all this stuff. And she's like, that's awesome. And I am not, once again, it's that selfish thing. Like, I don't know that she's going through all that stuff. I'm not even thinking about that. I'm just thinking about like, cool, like I don't want to drink right now. So that's actually really, really cool. Yeah. And then I come back and I destroy the whole thing again. And we they're saying like everybody's got their bottom, and like a lot of times we talk about that as far as like the addict and the alcoholic. Like, this was my bottom, my bottom was like in that psych ward, but like she had her bottom too. Like, there's only so much more that she could tolerate. And like, for the early in my sobriety, I would be so mad at these dudes that drank for 30 years and still had their families and like still had their wives. And I'm like, man, not even a quarter of that, and I lose my kids, I lose my wife. Like, how is that fair? And the answer is like, it's not fair. But life is not fair. Right. I did enough damage in a short amount of time that she didn't want to deal with it. Right. Yeah, she
had a limit.
Yeah, and I eventually learned to respect that, and I eventually learned to whatever. So my relationship with my kids, it's like anything else. It was a progression. It was really awkward at first. I used to cry back and forth every single time I went to see him. We started at 1 day a week. And now 4.5 years later, like I see my kids twice a week, every week, Monday and Tuesday, every week after school. I actually leave work early so I can make sure I pick my youngest up from the bus stop, because I like to pick him up from the bus stop. Don't have to. That's something I just enjoy doing. And then I hang out with my kids. And then, if she needs help or something falls through, then I get to go over there and be there. Like, they will occasionally come over and stay. I'm living with a friend of mine, lived with my brother for a while. They used to come over and stay. And like, that's kind of like the next part of my journey, is being able to see them a little bit more. But like, we co-parent really well. I try to communicate as best I can with her. If she's doing something and like, I was a kid. I know. So when my son goes, well, no, Mom lets us do that. Like, let me check first. So like, I try to do this thing where we're still a cohesive unit. Like, I try not to. And, I just like before, I've messed up plenty of times. She's had to call me out on some bad behaviors that I've had as a father. And, some of that is just because I don't spend as much time with them. So I want to have more fun with them. So sometimes I can be a little lax with like, hey, let's get our homework done. And once again, I need to be called out on that stuff. And she did. And I was like, you are absolutely right. Right. And then I, now that's part of what I do with my kids is like we have fun, but like we still do the whole parent thing, and we do the good thing co-parenting wise. And she has been remarried. Dude's cool. Kids seem to like him. That's all I can ask for.
Yeah, that's good, man. That's very, very mature. Yeah. Well, thanks a lot for coming out. It was really good to like hear it again.
Yeah.
And like I said, there's a lot of similarities in your story when I heard it the first time.
Yeah.
So, one last question. I got. What would you tell somebody who's going through some of that pain right now, and then they're drinking, and what was the advice that you give to them?
It's like the thing that just comes to mind is like this whole thing is hard, but it's worth it. You know what I mean? Because as much as I still struggle with some of like the mental health stuff and some of the other stuff, the majority of my life I'm just doing it. I'm just living a life, and like I couldn't imagine what that was like before, because every second of every day was like, am I gonna drink? When can I drink? Like, why do I hate myself? And I like those things have kind of faded away through some of the hard work. But it's worth it.
Yeah,
doing the hard work is worth it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you got look at you today. You're the thing that like struck me was that thing of like calling your wife from that. You're like I remember those times, and I never want to go back to those feelings and being a slave to that. Right. Yeah. It's like so it's one day at a time, right?
One day at a time.
One day at a time.
Yeah.
So thanks a lot. I really appreciate it for coming out.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So if you like the podcast, please subscribe. And if you want to get a little bit more information on what we're trying to do, please reach out to justtoday.org and learn a little bit more about our story. Thank you very much.